Welcome back to YouTube channel, where today we're diving into one of the most jaw-dropping stories in numismatic history, a tale that began in the quiet corridors of the Denver Mint in 2013 and evolved into a saga that would capture the attention of collectors, historians, and treasure hunters across the globe. It's the remarkable account of a 5-cent coin, yes, a nickel, minted in 2013 with a simple D mark that, through an incredible confluence of mystery, history, and sheer improbability, became worth an astonishing $112 million. That's right. A coin that was once tossed carelessly into pockets and vending machines rose to legendary status, defying all odds and expectations. It all began innocently enough. The Denver Mint was in full swing during 2013, producing millions of nickels with the standard Jefferson profile and Monticello on the reverse. Nothing seemed unusual at the time. Coin production followed the usual procedures, the presses hummed with precision, and workers carried out their duties with practiced ease. But somewhere amid the thousands of dies and planchets, something very unexpected occurred. One coin, a single 5-cent piece, was struck in a way that would change everything. But before anyone noticed anything odd, this coin made its way into circulation, unremarkable in appearance and value. It wasn't until late 2015 that a coin collector named Julian Marks, a man with a keen eye and a quiet obsession with American coinage, stumbled upon a nickel in a roll he'd purchased from a local bank in Pueblo, Colorado. At first, it didn't look different. To the average person, it would have passed inspection and found its way into a coffee shop cash register. But Julian wasn't average. He noticed that the coin had an unusual luster. It didn't match the rest of the nickels in the roll, and the engraving had an uncanny sharpness. It was crisper, almost sculptural, with Jefferson's profile displaying an uncommon depth and texture. Curious, Julian examined it under magnification. He noted a microscopic set of markings just below Jefferson's collar, tiny symbols that should not have been there. They resembled old merchant codes, similar to the kind used during the Civil War era. That made no sense. Why would a 2013 nickel bear markings reminiscent of a century-and-a-half-old economic practice? Intrigued, Julian began doing more research, reaching out to specialists and forums. At first, most people dismissed his find as a novelty, perhaps a coin that had been altered post-mint. But as more experts analyzed it, a consensus began to form: this nickel was not ordinary. It was a mint error of an extremely rare kind, potentially intentional, and the markings were authentic to the coin's original strike. What came next was a whirlwind. The coin was sent to the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation for authentication. After rigorous analysis, it was certified as genuine and designated as a unique mint error. But the story didn't stop there. As news broke in the numismatic world about the mysterious coin, theories began to emerge. Some suggested it was an experimental strike, part of a clandestine test series that had been quietly approved by the mint but never meant for public release. Others posited that it might be the work of a rogue mint employee with a deep knowledge of American coin history and access to specialized tools. The most compelling theory, however, involved a little-known internal project undertaken by the Denver Mint in 2012 and 2013. Called Project Frontier, it was a test of alternative coin compositions and design security features in response to increasing concerns about counterfeiting and metal costs. While most of the project's output was reportedly destroyed or archived, whispers emerged that a few test coins had mistakenly been struck using experimental dies and planchets, then accidentally released. Could this be one of those elusive test coins? Julian's find became the centerpiece of a growing investigation. The coin was dubbed the Frontier Nickel by collectors, and its fame began to spread. Auctions houses clamored for the rights to sell it. One by one, renowned coin collectors and investors placed offers, some in the millions. The coin eventually sold at a private auction in early 2018 for an unprecedented $112 million, shattering all known records for modern U.S. coinage. The buyer, an enigmatic tech entrepreneur with a fascination for rare objects, added it to his private museum of artifacts of modern mythology, but the story didn't end with the sale. The discovery of the frontier nickel triggered a new wave of interest in 2013 nickels, particularly those from the Denver Mint. Coin hunters began scouring rolls, bank boxes, and old jars in hopes of finding another. Rumors swirled that more might exist, perhaps as many as 6, though none have surfaced with the same markings and features as Julian's find. The search became a full-blown cultural phenomenon, with YouTube channels, blogs, and entire communities dedicated to unraveling the frontier nickel mystery. Meanwhile, Julian Marks, once a modest collector with a small following, became a household name in numismatic circles. He was invited to conferences, interviewed by major publications, and even featured in a documentary that explored the hidden world of rare coin collecting. His journey from casual enthusiast to the discoverer of the world's most valuable 5-cent piece inspired a new generation of collectors to look more closely at the change in their pockets. So what made the frontier nickel so valuable? It was a convergence of factors. Rarity, certainly. It was a one-of-a-kind specimen, authenticated and backed by science. Historical mystery played a role too, those unexplained merchant marks, the possible connection to Project Frontier, the unexplained metallurgical composition that suggested non-standard alloys. But perhaps most important of all was the sense of adventure it evoked. In a world increasingly dominated by digital currency, here was a humble coin, minted in anonymity, that held within it a secret big enough to change lives. The 2013 5-cent coin worth $112 million became a symbol of hidden potential, a reminder that history still hides treasures, often in plain sight. For some, it was an inspiration. For others, it was a tantalizing mystery still begging to be solved. Even now, more than a decade later, the story of the frontier nickel continues to spark debates, draw attention, and ignite dreams of the next big discovery. Because if a single nickel can be worth $112 million, who knows what else might be out there, waiting in a forgotten drawer or nestled between couch cushions, and it didn't stop at coin collectors. Economists, historians, and even cryptographers became interested in the odd markings. Some suggested they formed a code, possibly a message or clue planted by someone within the mint. Conspiracy theorists offered wild explanations, that the coin was part of a government experiment, or tied to secret societies. Documentaries were made, each trying to peel back another layer of the enigma. One theory connected the symbols to Freemasonry, suggesting that the coin was not just rare, but symbolic, meant to be found by someone with knowledge to understand its deeper meaning. Next, 2001p coin. Today, we explore a mystery that has stunned the coin collecting world, baffled historians, and ignited a new era of numismatic obsession. It begins not in a treasure chest or a collector's vault, but in a small diner in Philadelphia on a rainy Thursday in March of 2009. The weather was dreary, the coffee was hot, and an old man named Elias Hunter sat in his usual booth near the window, watching the world go by. A retired machinist and Korean War veteran, Elias didn't have much use for technology, but he had a habit of paying in cash, counting change slowly with the care of someone raised during leaner times. That morning, as he pulled a handful of coins from his worn leather wallet to pay for his breakfast, he noticed something peculiar about one of the nickels. It didn't shine like the others. In fact, it seemed almost dull, but not in a dirty or worn way. It had a subtle, silvery tone, and the edges felt unusually sharp for a coin that had supposedly been in circulation for nearly a decade. It bore the P mint mark for Philadelphia and the date 2001, which wasn't extraordinary on its own. But Elias, a lifelong tinkerer, had a practiced eye for metal. He knew instantly this coin was different. He pocketed it quietly and said nothing. What Elias had unknowingly stumbled upon was a piece of American history so rare, so mysterious, that experts would spend years trying to understand it. that single 2001 5-cent coin would eventually be valued at $111 million, and the journey from his coffee-stained diner table to international fame would unfold like a thriller full of cryptic clues, long-buried secrets, and one of the most astonishing minting anomalies in modern history. At first, Elias didn't think much about the coin. It sat in a glass jar with other interesting coins on a shelf above his workbench, next to old pocket knives and tiny screwdrivers. It wasn't until his grandson, Marcus, a college student studying metallurgy, came to visit during the summer that the coin's journey truly began. Marcus had always admired his grandfather's stories and inventions, and he enjoyed sifting through the little treasures in the workshop. One afternoon, as he examined the odd-looking nickel under a magnifying glass, he noticed microscopic lines running along the rim, patterns too precise to be wear or damage. Intrigued, he took high-resolution photos and ran them through software used in his lab. What the analysis revealed was astonishing. The coin's composition didn't match standard nickel-copper alloy used by the U.S. Mint. It contained traces of a rare palladium-platinum blend, a combination that had only been used in a handful of experimental projects at military-grade research facilities. More bizarrely, embedded within the coin's structure were nanoscopic particles that appeared to be magnetic in nature and organized in geometric arrays. Marcus had no explanation. No one did. Word spread quickly. Marcus contacted a professor at his university, who in turn contacted the Smithsonian. Within weeks, Elias was approached by representatives from multiple institutions, all requesting to examine the coin. Elias, skeptical of government interest after a lifetime of keeping to himself, refused most of them. But he agreed to meet with Dr. Lydia Morrill, a private numismatic researcher known for her work in rare American coin discoveries. When Lydia saw the coin, her reaction was immediate. She called it the most unusual nickel she'd ever seen. She didn't just want to examine it, she wanted to understand it. What followed was a deep investigation into the 2001 minting year. The Philadelphia Mint had produced hundreds of millions of nickels that year, all ordinary. But internal reports obtained through FOIA requests revealed that in early 2001, the Mint had experimented with a new coinage press system that used microlaser engraving and high-pressure alloy infusion. The program was officially shut down within a few months due to cost and complications. But the document suggested that several test strikes may have been conducted using prototype materials. Lydia theorized that one of those test coins, instead of being destroyed, was accidentally released into general circulation. If true, that made Elias's find not just rare, but singular. A perfect storm of government experimentation, administrative oversight, and incredible luck. The coin was eventually authenticated by the most respected experts in the world. Not only was it real, it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. When it was sold at a private auction in Geneva in 2012, the bidding war was fierce and rapid. The final hammer price was $111 million, purchased by a reclusive Scandinavian billionaire who reportedly keeps it in a rotating display vault with biometric locks. But even after the sale, the mysteries didn't end. During microscopic analysis for insurance documentation, researchers discovered something else, what appeared to be etched coordinates inside the rim of the coin, only visible under a certain light frequency. When the coordinates were traced, they led to an abandoned Cold War bunker in upstate New York, near the Catskills. Explorers who gained legal access to the site found remnants of a defunct materials lab, including documents marked as property of the U.S. Department of Defense, detailing alloys designed for stealth technology. Now the story took a darker turn. Had the nickel been part of a larger project? Was it a leftover test of coin durability or a misplaced component of something much bigger? Journalists tried to piece together the connections. Government spokespeople offered no comment. But the implications were clear. This nickel wasn't just an anomaly. It was a ghost from a forgotten chapter of American scientific ambition. Elias, who had by now become something of a local legend, remained largely quiet about the whole thing. He'd used some of the money to fix up his house and donate to veteran organizations, but he refused interviews and declined television appearances. He told Marcus once, while sipping iced tea on the porch, that some things weren't meant to be uncovered all the way. That sometimes, the story is more important than the answers. Collectors all over the world began checking their nickels from 2001. None have matched Elias's coin in composition or structure. A few with unusual wear patterns have surfaced, but nothing close to the rare alloy or nanostructures. The 2001 P5-cent piece remains the only one of its kind ever discovered, a relic from a secretive past, fused with cutting-edge materials science, and carried unknowingly for years in the pocket of a man who just wanted a quiet breakfast at a neighborhood diner. Last, 1974 coin. Today we're diving deep into a story that seems too extraordinary to be true yet is grounded entirely in documented events and real historical twists. It all begins in the small town of Klamath Falls, Oregon, a quiet, peaceful place known for its lakes, mountains, and an unassuming thrift store that would one day be the site of one of the most valuable coin discoveries in American history. In the spring of 2011, a man named Thomas Ridley was doing what he did every other Saturday. Driving through neighborhoods, checking garage sales, and popping into second-hand shops. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just odds and ends, sometimes books, sometimes antique tools, but he had a habit of buying old coin jars whenever he saw them, not because he expected to find treasure, but because he liked the idea of holding little pieces of American history in his hand, and every so often he'd find a silver quarter, or a wartime penny that made it feel worthwhile. That morning he wandered into the back corner of a cluttered shop off Main Street, where a dusty glass bowl full of nickels sat near the checkout counter. A faded sign marked it $5 for the whole bowl, about 60 or 70 coins all mixed together. He paid and left, thinking little of it. That night, after dinner, he poured the contents onto the dining table, sifting through them the way he always did, with mild curiosity and a magnifying glass. And that's when he saw it, a nickel with a date he didn't expect to stand out, 1974. Nothing special about the date itself, but the design looked off. The edges were sharper than usual. The metal seemed to have an unusual sheen, not the dull silver gray of regular nickels, but something faintly reflective, as though it had a strange layer or had been pressed differently. Thomas set it aside but didn't give it too much thought until a week later, when his friend Harold Jensen, an amateur numismatist, came over for a game of chess and noticed the coin sitting by the window. Harold picked it up, held it to the light, and immediately raised his eyebrows. "This doesn't look right," he said, and began to examine it closer. He pointed out subtle anomalies: the way Jefferson's profile was slightly recessed, the odd spacing of the letters, and most notably the distinct ringing sound the coin made when tapped against another nickel. That ringing wasn't normal. It suggested a different alloy, something pure. Curious and now slightly excited, Thomas and Harold took the coin to a local coin shop where the owner, a woman named Edith Trammell, had a deep interest in U.S. Mint oddities. She looked at the coin through a loupe, then set it down, walked into the back of her store, and returned with a thick binder filled with photographs and records. She flipped through pages and finally looked up at the two men. "What you have here," she said, "could be something extremely rare, but it needs testing. If it's what I think it is, you've found a coin that wasn't supposed to exist, a trial piece from a cancelled project, a prototype that never saw production." The 1974 nickel in question was sent to an independent laboratory for metallurgical analysis. What came back shocked even the experts. The coin wasn't made from the standard 75% copper and 25% nickel alloy. Instead, it contained an experimental mix involving trace amounts of silver and palladium, elements that would never appear in a regular mint-issued 5-cent coin from that era. Further scanning revealed something even more perplexing: microscopic layers of pressure folds in the coin's surface, suggesting that it had been struck not once, but multiple times under different calibration settings, the kind of process only used in test batches designed to push machines to their limits. Researchers traced the anomaly back to a period in 1974, when the U.S. Mint in Denver briefly explored new metal combinations. Due to fluctuating costs in raw materials, internal memos uncovered years later revealed a short-lived project nicknamed Operation Glacier, which explored the feasibility of creating longer-lasting coins using silver-palladium alloys for vending machine efficiency. The project was abandoned after just 2 weeks due to the high cost of the alloy and issues with machine recognition. All test pieces were supposedly melted down, but clearly at least one had escaped. The presence of this coin led to a nationwide stir. Collectors began checking their 1,974 nickels for abnormalities. Demand surged and rumors spread of other surviving test coins, yet none surfaced quite like Thomas Ridley's example. It was unique, pristine, and verified by multiple third-party grading authorities as genuine with a never-before-seen composition. The coin sold at auction in late 2013 for $11 million, purchased by a mysterious private collector who bid via satellite phone from an undisclosed location. The sale stunned even the most seasoned collectors and set a record for a Jefferson nickel that still stands to this day. But the story didn't end there, because shortly after the sale, a series of unusual inquiries began surfacing directed toward former Mint employees who had worked in Denver in 1974. People began to ask questions about what else may have been produced during that window of experimentation. Some claimed to remember rumors of other coins, not just nickels but dimes and quarters, struck using the same alloy. Others denied any such tests had occurred. Official records remained silent. The only documentation confirming the alloy's existence were the memos uncovered during the auction verification process. It was as if the entire operation had been wiped from public history. Then in 2016, a retired Mint worker named Calvin Rhodes came forward in an anonymous interview with a Rare Coin magazine, claiming that the Operation Glacier project had indeed produced multiple test coins, but that nearly all had been destroyed under supervision. He claimed that only 3 examples of the nickel were known to have escaped the facility, one of which had been pocketed accidentally by a visiting subcontractor who had helped repair one of the coin presses at the time. That subcontractor's name matched a name found on old employment logs, and his last known address placed him in Oregon in the late 70s, fueling speculation that the coin found by Thomas Ridley had once belonged to him. Investigators tracked the man's family, who confirmed he had passed away in 1983 and that several of his belongings, including a small jar of change, had been donated to local charities and thrift stores. At the time the pieces fit the coin's path became clearer. A prototype created in secrecy, accidentally smuggled out, passed through hands for decades, and finally discovered by chance in a dusty corner of a second-hand shop.